When you hear about the relationship between filmmaker and studio executive, what you often hear about are the bitter battles of creative control and how they ruin the movie by forcing the ideas on it. There's certainly a lot of stories out there about this, but many of the most beloved films also had input from studio executives, and they can also bring good ideas to the table that can help improve the finished product. After all, they want the movie to be in the best shape and appeal to audiences too. The truth is, every film hears suggestions from the suit-wearing higher-ups, and the filmmakers can ignore these or not. However, a lot of times, they will listen to them and think, well, you have a point. Phil Lord and Chris Miller, for example, have talked about this regarding the making of Cloud Over Chance of Meatballs. When a version of the film was screened to Sony Execs, it was considered very funny and had the makings of a good film. But Sony Pictures chairman Amy Pascal felt the story lacked heart and focus. It was just a bunch of comical scenes strung together without a proper story to make us care about the characters. In response to this, Lord and Miller gave the lead protagonist, Flint Lockwood, a father, and their relationship became a pivotal part of the movie and allowed it to become more than a series of food-based gags. Another Sony Pictures animation movie was also slightly helped by executive notes, in this case SpiderMan Into the Spider-Verse. When Miles Morales is at his lowest point in the story, he was originally going to receive a pep talk from Aunt May. However, Sony Pictures head Tom Rothman suggested to the filmmakers that it would be a lot better and more emotional if Miles' father was the one to give him that needed confidence. The filmmaking team went, of course, that is better, and changed the scene accordingly. Speaking of Spider-Man, I've noticed people have this fantasy version in their heads of how the productions of those movies go. Their interpretation is that Sony had no say in the great Spider-Man movies, while the other films were less good because they got involved. I highly doubt Sony handed their $100 million summer tentpole to the Evil Dead director and told him, go do whatever you want. They were still very much involved on the first two Spider-Man films in approving casting, villains, the script, how the movie would look, and other production aspects, and certainly would have provided notes during the editing. Amy Pascal was even the person who was keen on hiring Sam Raimi for Spider-Man. On every single blockbuster you're a fan of, the studio executives gave notes and suggestions, and many probably did make it into the finished film. I mentioned Tom Rothman's input on Into the Spider-Verse, and yet there's still a belief on the internet that Sony just ignored that movie and did not interfere in its making. The funny thing is, the idea of making an animated Spider-Man movie actually came from Pascal when she was running the studio. Something that will often come up in production meetings is picking a title, preferably one that will better attract an audience. There are certainly examples of movies having bad or confusing titles chosen by the studio which can hurt the box office. However, sometimes they actually do have the right idea. When Phil Alden Robinson adapted the book Shoeless Joe into a film, he was very disappointed that Universal decided to change the title to Field of Dreams. He called up the author, W.P. Kinsella, expecting him to be upset at this news. Instead, Kinsella revealed he never liked the title Shoeless Joe, which was his publisher's idea, and his original name for the book was, by complete coincidence, The Dream Field. Another example of this is The Producers. Mel Brooks originally titled it Springtime for Hitler, like the play within the movie. However, Joseph E. Levine, the head of distributor Embassy Pictures, told him he would agree to release the movie only if Brooks changed the title. This was the right move, as many would probably get the wrong idea of the film's premise if it was called Springtime for Hitler. The Producers is a better, more straightforward title that nicely communicates that it's about, well, producers. Sometimes in the pitch meeting, the execs can latch onto a concept that winds up being a fan favorite once the production is released. A good example of this comes not from a movie, but rather a television series. Phineas and Ferb was not initially supposed to have a song in every episode. However, the Disney Channel execs loved the song played in the episode Flop Stars so much they asked the creators to include a song in every episode. And the catchy tunes featured on Phineas and Ferb wound up becoming one of the most celebrated aspects of the series. Sometimes, extremely early on in the development process, the studio will recognize that maybe the idea they were pitched won't be to audiences' liking. When Warner Brothers tried to revive the Batman franchise in the early 2000s, one director they considered was Darren Aronofsky. He and Frank Miller collaborated on an extremely dark script that was more akin to Taxi Driver than what audiences would want to see in a Batman movie, and the studio decided to go with Christopher Nolan's take instead. The Star Trek movies were also partly saved by executive interference. After Star Trek the Motion Picture bored many viewers and also went wildly over budget, Paramount felt any possible sequels needed to go in a different direction. Their solution was to completely downsize Gene Roddenberry's involvement in the movies. The studio hired Harve Bennett to try and produce a better and less expensive Star Trek film. It was Bennett who then chose to make Khan the villain of the next movie. These early decisions thus paved the way for Star Trek II to become a more popular and liked adventure than its predecessor. People often complain about studios ordering scenes to be cut out of fear of the audience getting bored, but occasionally executives know what they're talking about. Kevin Smith's movie Mallrats was originally 2 hours, which was considered a little long for what was meant as a breezy comedy about a bunch of 20-somethings hanging out at a shopping mall. They told Smith that a comedy called Mallrats should not take 30 minutes to get to the titular mall, and test screening reactions proved that point. Another Kevin Smith example is his first movie, Clerks, although this came before he sold the film to Miramax. The movie originally ended with Dante getting shot by a robber. Noted independent film producer John Pearson, who was instrumental in helping launch the careers of directors like Spike Lee, Richard Linklater, and Michael Moore, told Smith how much of a downer ending this was, and he should cut it. Smith realized Pearson was right and decided to end Clerks on a more upbeat note. All of Disney's iconic animated films have had some form of executive influence. For example, it was Jeffrey Katzenberg's idea to have Beauty and the Beast be a musical with Alan Menken and Howard Ashman songs. Katzenberg also selected Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise to direct the film because of how impressed he was with the animated pre-show of the Epcot attraction Cranium Command. The project had initially started under the direction of Richard Purdom and was not a musical. While Purdom's version would certainly been interesting to see, I don't think too many people are upset at the Beauty and the Beast that made it to screens. Katzenberg was also instrumental in helping guide the story of Aladdin to its final form, most notably getting rid of Aladdin's mother. While this sadly led to a touching song getting cut, the character is not missed in the finished film. Probably the most infamous case of executive meddling paving the way towards a highly regarded Disney animated film is The Emperor's New Groove. Originally intended as a serious epic titled Kingdom of the Sun, the executives, and even the film's own producer, felt the story was too busy. There's a part in the documentary The Sweatbox where we see then Disney Animation president Thomas Schumacher explaining quite clearly why Kingdom of the Sun was not working, and his notes are not unreasonable. Eventually, it became the wacky comedy we know today, considered one of the funniest and most refreshing films in the Disney canon. It wound up very different from Roger Allard's original pitch, and a part of me still wonders what Kingdom of the Sun would have been like. However, I certainly won't complain about The Emperor's New Groove being somehow put into existence. It's fun and occasionally frustrating to read stories about how studio executives completely changed a potentially great movie and turned it into something underwhelming, leading to all kinds of movements to release the director's preferred cut. There are plenty of those kinds of stories that come out of Hollywood on an annual basis. However, you might be surprised to learn that a lot of your favorite films came about partly because of good suggestions and notes from the people in charge, with those small tweaks doing a lot to help the movie. Can you think of other examples of executive meddling improving the finished product? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.